his name be erased.
They're making a joke about like the fact that he's from Yeshiva, and they're also making.
I don't know what they say, but that's what the book is called originally. Yeah. Are we ready to roll?
We're having some issues with Facebook, but we're live. Okay. We have a request also.
Yeah.
I can't say Buddha.
That when people have questions, that we either pass the mic around or maybe that you repeat the question for the audience to be able to hear what the questions are.
Okay, we can handle that. All right, gentlemen. So this was sort of an unexpected choice because we went into a topic which was of great interest to all of us and to me, which is the idea of sof ma'aseh b'machshava techila. The idea that the last indeed is not only first in thought, but it's first in preceding thought. So as we were busy reading that, in my daily seder of the Rebbe's works, I came into a mimer which is entirely about this concept and fleshes it out in a way that we didn't even dream that it could be done. So I decided to take us there, and it's a Yud Beis Tammuz mimer, which means we're right on time. Of course, Yud Beis Tammuz is tonight. Baruch Hashem, wow.
What's up with tonight? What is that?
It's the great holiday of the redemption of the Friedrich Rebbe, Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz.
You got a Fabrengen, me?
It's a Fabrengen, for sure. It's a couple Fabrengens. But so we will be continuing this mimer, obviously, after Yud Beis Tammuz. It's not exactly the shortest mimer. It's not exactly the easiest mimer. I thought maybe to just do that section, which was of interest to us, but the mimer is such a geschmack that I feel I wouldn't hold it back from you all. So we'll probably be working on this for the next couple of weeks. It's deep and grand. We did finish last mimer, yeah. Okay, in that vein, let's begin. This is another, just like we had before, Yehi Hashem Elokeinu Imanu Kasher Haya Im Avosenu. If you remember that mimer that we did 2 mimers ago, before the Bar Mitzvah mimer, that was a mimer that the Friedrich Rebbe said, and the Rebbe said a mimer in the same name. So during that period, when the Rebbe was released, the previous Rebbe was released, he said a few mimarim of thanksgiving and with titles which were all about his life being saved. And so those maimarim became obviously classic maimarim. And the Rebbe said also over the years many maimarim with the same name. So this the Divrei HaMaschil, the beginning of this maimer, is based on a maimer that the Friedrich Rebbe said on Yud Beis Tammuz in the thanksgiving to God that his life was saved. So it starts with the word Hasam nafshenu b'chaim v'lo nasan lamot ragleinu. Rebbe say this in Tehillim, and it happens to be the Shir of Tehillim of Yud Beis of the month, the 12th of the month, so we'll be saying it tomorrow. We are not having any more of those at the moment. My copy man is getting married, and he's out of commission. We need a new copy man. Hasam nafshenu b'chaim means he places our souls in life, v'lo nasan lamot ragleinu. He doesn't give our foot to stumble. Okay? Hine perush hapashut bazeh, the simple meaning of this verse, she'eniach osanu b'chaim, is that he left us alive. In other words, Hasam nafshenu b'chaim simply means he kept us alive, right? Friedrich Rebbe is basically praising God that he didn't have the opposite of life, where he probably, according to nature, should have, right? He leaves us life to stay alive. And not just does he give us life, he keeps us in life. He makes it so that there's not even a tripping up, even in our foot. In other words, not even to keep us alive, but even he doesn't let us trip. Skipping the parentheses, וזהו גם הטעם הפשוט לכך שאחד ממאמריו של בעל הגאולה והשמחה שאמרם בימי הגאולה והשמחה מתחיל בפסוק זה. And this is the reason. Does anyone have one they're not using? Not really. This is the reason, the simple reason. This is maybe you guys could share. This is the simple reason that one of the Maimarim of the Baal HaGeula V'Simcha of the Friedrich Rebbe, who's called the Baal HaGeula, the one that the redemption happened to, this is the reason that he said this Maimer with this pasuk in these days. But according to the simple meaning, right? We don't know if you're going to just keep the simple meaning and try and read this verse as it is. Why does it say he placed our souls in life? Hasam nafshenu b'chaim. It should have just said, he left us alive. He gave us life, and he didn't let our foot falter. Why does he say he placed our souls in life? And this is the question that the Frierdiker Rebbe asks. Okay, it gets a little technical. We're saying, why does he say he put our souls in life instead of he put us in life? We're going to soon see the Frierdiker Rebbe asked this question. There's a difficulty on this. And his basic problem with this verse is that the soul is what's called chai be'etzem. What does it mean, chai be'etzem? It means that it lives intrinsically without having to receive life from something else. What the soul is essentially a piece of life itself. That's what the soul is. It is life. So what does it mean that you're going to place the soul in life? The soul already is in life. The soul can't remove itself from life. The soul is essentially the inyan of life. Makdim levayer. And he first prefaces to explain, since the soul is essentially life, and not only that, but any etzem, the revelation of the etzem, has the same properties and qualities of the etzem. So for example, it's a kind of a lofty example, but let's say God, right? The etzem of Hashem, right, is infinite, and therefore the Gilui of Hashem, the revelation that comes off that infinite body, is going to be an infinite revelation of light. Any revelation of a thing is essentially shares the properties of that thing. So if the soul is be'etzem chayas, what it is life, then anything that's going to come off of the soul is going to share and be the revelation of that essential soul is also going to bear the essential property of life. You'll see how that plays out in a minute. But the point is that if the etzem is chay be'etzem, then the revelations are also called chayas. The revelation shares the properties of the essence that it's revealing. Hini nefesh hu chay be'etzem gilu shelo hu or lahachayos. So the revelation that comes off this soul is a light which enlivens, right? Anything that this soul touches, it brings to life. That's the idea. Because its revelation of the soul is that the revelations are compared to it, and just like it is life, anything it touches turns to life. Right? He said anything it touches turns to gold, anything it touches becomes alive. Now what is this life that he's talking about? It's called the light and the life of the soul in general. What does it mean, general? That's the word we're going to try to understand. She'eno koach prati benefesh. General life as opposed to a particular power of the soul. What does it mean, general life? Right? It's the quality of life that everything in your body shares equally. Even though your brain and your heart and your foot have different qualities of life, and it was their form of life, their expression of life is totally different. They all equally share the fact that they're alive, right? And so there's this idea of just like essential chayas, which is like the klal and the prat. You can have prat chayas, or you can have klal chayas, which is just the essence, the essential being of being alive, as opposed to not, right? And so when the soul comes to the body, it gives off essentially life to whatever it touches, which is a general life. It just makes the thing alive, not necessarily at that point breaking it down into life of a brain, life of a heart, life of a foot. Ki'im hu is galus nefesh, right? Because if it's the revelation of the soul, lios nefesh hu chay be'etzem, because the soul is essentially alive, ha'or va'gili mimenu hu chayas, then the life force that comes out of it is automatically brings the body to life. And it's alive. Ad kan lashono. Up until here, says the Rebbe, is a direct quote from the Maimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe. So this piece that we just learned was what the Frierdiker Rebbe was thinking about and discussing based on this verse. And essentially, I'll just repeat it to you for a second. He says it doesn't seem to make sense. Hasam nafshenu b'chaim. If our soul is essentially alive, life, and is alive without compromise, it can't not be alive. That's what the soul is. It's life. Then what does it mean that Hashem placed life on our soul? It doesn't need any placing of life on it. It's essentially alive, and not only is it essentially alive, everything it touches becomes alive because it is life itself, the soul.
What do we say? We're saying the soul, we placed life on our soul, or our soul was placed in life?
Literally, our soul was placed in life, but the meaning of it really is that our soul somehow gained life, right? In other words, he gave life to our soul. That's sort of how. What's that? The question is, the word nafshenu there, that Hashem is placing life on it, right? That itself makes no sense. If you want to say he gave us life and he saved our life, no problem. But as soon as you're going to be medayik and say he gave our soul life, I'm going to raise my hand and say, what do you mean you gave the soul life? The soul is life. It doesn't need you to give it any life.
Why?
Because the soul is essentially, what is life, right? It's like this. It's a funny thing, but it could come and go, unfortunately, from individuals. But that means they either have their soul or they don't. If they have their soul, it's alive, right? So to give the soul life doesn't make any sense. The soul is life. Not only is the soul life, but anything that touches the soul automatically becomes alive because it's not just alive; it's like a life giver because it's essential life.
Like fire.
Like fire?
It's like saying you give fire heat.
Like lighting on a fire.
You can't say I'm going to give fire heat. It doesn't make sense.
Or even or more than that. You can't say I'm going to light fire on fire. That's really more like it, right? It's not a quality that he's giving to fire. He's trying to say I'm giving soul life. Well, the soul is life. Okay, so this is just basically a quote.
All he said so far,
That's what the Frierdiker Rebbe was investigating, and that's how his mimer on this pasuk developed. Now the Rebbe sort of takes over and discusses that. He actually says ad kan. You see those words ad kan aleph chaf lamed, ad kan lashono. That's how you end a quote, basically in Lashon HaKodesh, is you say up until here was the language that we're quoting. Yesh levar kavanas hadavarim. So comes the Rebbe and he says, let's explain the intention of these matters. De lechora, you good over there? Haya efshar lomer sheperush hapasik hasam gomer b'chaim. It's possible to say that the meaning of placing soul in life, hu hamshachas dargan nailis yosef b'inyan achayis. Maybe we could say that what this really means is that we're giving another higher level, a dimension of life to the soul. In other words, the soul's alive, okay, but I'm going to amplify the soul's life with another level of life. Maybe that's what it means. Hasam nafshenu b'chaim, our soul, which is life, I'm going to give it more life. Yeshnam kama dargos b'chayis, because there are many levels of life force. The hainu, what are those levels? Ofanim shonim b'mshachas v'gilu achayis. There's different manners that the revelation and the drawing forth of life can take, right? There's different expressions that life can take. And maybe what the pasuk is saying is I'm going to give a higher level of expression of life to you who had a lower expression at this point. Like, for example, there's definitely, even halachically speaking, there's a different level of life that's inside of a limb that the life depends on, as opposed to the life force that's found in the heel of the foot, which has no life. Okay, so let's look at what he's saying here. There are differences in life, right? For example, there are certain limbs which al pi halacha, let's say an animal gets poked in the brain or poked a hole in the heart, right? It's called treif. It automatically makes the animal treif. In other words, it's no longer able to be kosher. Even if you shecht it, it's too late because it's basically heading towards death because there's certain limbs which hold the essential life of that creature. And therefore, there's a higher level of life force in those limbs than, let's say, for example, the heel. The heel is called the angel of death of the body, right? It's an interesting concept, meaning to say that you can take the heel right off the body, chas v'shalom, and it doesn't stop the body from being alive. So the amount of life force that's in the foot in general, and the heel in particular, it's still alive, right? Let's say it's more alive than, let's say, your hair, or your fingernails, and it's certainly more alive than your shirt, right? But the idea is that you can see there's different levels of gradients of life force, and therefore we could maybe say that he places our life to our soul is basically just upping the life of the soul because there's different gradients. Yes, Noam.
So the angel of death of man sounds like it's the extreme least alive part
That's
of the
right.
human body, and then after that you mentioned that nails and hair are even less alive.
Because
So
they're
maybe
not
the
even really
angels of death-
part of the body, right? They're not. They're like they grow. They're growing, but they're not actually part of your body. You can cut them off. You don't cut off your heel, right? Because so it shows you it's a little bit more connected with the body than the nails and the hair. Yeah.
But isn't it in Tanya chapter 2, I think, that it says, like, this is the generation of the heel, which connects to the head, which is coming from the seed of the father. So like, wouldn't the heel have such...
So what you've discovered there is that you're the... Oh, so just for the posterity here, you're asking, because I have the microphone, you're asking, but wait, we're the heel of all the generations. It's called Ikvasa de Mashiach, the heels of Mashiach. If you take the man of the Jewish people as one man from the beginning of time to the end, we're the heels, which means that we are the angel of death of the Jewish people. It doesn't mean that we have more life force. Okay, the heel does something good, nice for the body. But again, if you take the heart out of the body's dead. Take the heel out of the body's not dead. So we're just understanding right now that there's different gradients of importance of life force distributed throughout the body. Obviously, the brain has more than the heart has more than the liver, and the lungs, but nonetheless, and therefore there's a whole category of them which it says the life depends on those limbs. And even in those limbs, there's a gradient, but then there's even limbs that the life doesn't depend on. And so we see from here just a simple fact that life is not equal in all places, right? And therefore, maybe we're getting away with this idea that when it says Hasam nafshenu b'chaim, that he gives life to our soul, maybe he's just upping our level. That it's talking about, yes, you're alive, but I'm going to give you more life and add, like, level up, right? With life, because life comes in gradients.
We're not that important, we're only the hill.
Maybe that's what he means.
So we feel it as...
Yeah.
Why do we call the heel angel of death? And we just said that like it doesn't cause death if we take it off. Wouldn't it make sense
No,
to
no,
call
because
something
no.
that does cause death? If you just
No. The idea is the angel of death is that it has it's like it's dead compared to the rest of the body. It doesn't feel anything, right? It's not, in other words, when you take it off, it doesn't necessarily cause the body as much pain. The fact that you can take it off and it doesn't kill you is because it's essentially dead already, right? It doesn't have as much life force. In fact, there's many limbs that you could take them off that won't kill you, right?
Yeah.
So in those limbs that are already not the soul, the life of the person is not dependent on, there's also a gradient, right? And the foot and the heel are the lowest on that gradient, right? Because there's the least amount of life inside of them. That's why it's called the angel of death, because it has the least amount of life. Okay, so we're in a Havamina right now. We're thinking maybe that's an answer to our mimer, that you can level up in life, in levels of life. Right? And on this he explains, and unfortunately that's not an answer. Why? Because the Frierdiker Rebbe explains that the word nefesh is already the top. Right? The word nefesh is basically life in its highest form. In other words, what did he call it? Chai be'etzem. It's essential life. It is life, right? If the malach hamavis of the body is because it like has the least amount of life force in it, it's just barely holding on to experiencing the life of the soul. Nefesh, the connotation of nefesh, is the exact opposite. It's something which is not even experiencing life coming into it and accepting a life force from something. It is the source of life, right? It's life itself. Whatever that there's nefesh, ruach, neshama, nachayim, yechid, that's what you're going to ask? Okay? Forget about it. The nefesh is chayis. Right? That's another conversation. Yeah, nefesh sometimes just means the whole soul. Like you say nefesh elokis, nefesh bahamis. You don't mean the ruach elokis. It just refers to the soul. Yeah. I mean, in a certain sense, they could all be the klal, depending. We could dial in different. The next mimer is about why nefesh, but right now we're not going into that level of
We added into the part here
detail.
where it says that Hashem makes sure that we don't trip. Is that connected to the feet?
It is. We're going to get to that big time. So in the meantime, our answer of leveling up in life, and maybe that's what it means, is going to place our soul in life and sort of bump us up from the heel to the head or something like that. It's out. We can't use that because the word nefesh already means chai be'etzem. Right? It's the highest level of life. It's intrinsically alive. There's no leveling up from there, seemingly. It's a life force which is not limited and is not characterized as any particular thing. Remember we said it's called general chayas. It's not even a chayas of a particular limb where you could say that there's another kind of chayas. It's the equalizing, like, life giver, which every single limb experiences equally. It's like the sovev, if you can handle that reference, right? Of what life is. You can have life as a Temimei. You can have life divided up into mind, heart, liver, lung, foot, where there's a gradient of life. But there's something beyond the minute distinctions between one level and another. There's just like the essence of the light itself, which is just life without being even divisible, right? It's what equalizes. It's the one thing that the foot and the head have in common. Before getting into like dialing their minute differences, the reality is what makes them alive in the first place? Nefesh. And therefore, where are you going to go from there? You're going to be more alive? You're alive. That's it. It doesn't get more alive than that. And therefore, it's not limited, it's not measured. And it doesn't encloak itself into a type of life. This is the word nefesh means specifically like life itself. It doesn't mean life as a brain or life as a liver or life as a heart. It's like the Orein Sof. It's like the Sovev light. It's so like infinite that it doesn't even have the potential of being contracted into a particular, and therefore it's not relevant to say that it could be a higher particular or a lower particular. It's the life itself. You following? And now going back to something else the Frierdiker Rebbe said, that it's not just the life, the soul is not just, the life force is not just in the soul itself. Remember we said that any revelation that comes from the essence is going to be essence-like. So therefore, when this essential life of the soul comes into contact with your body, right, it automatically gives life to the body. It enlivens and it brings the whole body to life instantaneously. A touch life to the body, it's alive, right? Like Frankenstein. Frankenstein's foot didn't come alive before his brain. It's alive, right? Because it touched life. Once life touches something, the revelation of life pours into that thing, and even its revelation is life. That's what he's trying to make the point here. Not just its life, anything that comes out of it is a life giver. That's why it says Hasam nafsheinu b'chaim. Nafsheinu means our soul, and it's referring to a plural, which means the godly soul and the animal soul, because once the godly soul comes into the animal soul, it gives it life instantaneously. And it gives it an essential life. Which means we're talking about not a situation where the soul is by itself in its essential sort of isolation. It's a goof. This is already a situation where the soul is already in a state of revealing itself and thus enlivening the body which it's inhabiting. So when the life comes into the body, the first thing it does is give general life. Think about almost like a fetus, right? First thing you have is just life, right? You put a couple cells together, they're alive. Then you can start to say, well, it comes out and there's a delineation between the brain and the heart. But there's in general, we talk about this in Chassidus in certain places, right? There's two different types of life. Sometimes we talk about Chassidus in general, like the Baal Shem Tov versus the Alter Rebbe, where you have two different forms of life. There's like general life, and then there's particular life. It's the same conversation as the Soviv and the Mamale. That, right, there's just encompassing godliness, and then there's godliness that you can fine-tune it into bringing individual things to life. What we're talking about right now is that the beginning of the soul touching the body is it just gives it general life. It's alive as opposed to not, without getting into any particulars.
What happens right at conception?
What's that?
What happens right at conception?
That happens right at conception.
So,
I mean, it's alive. Yeah.
if the issue was that it's not giving it general life, it would be bechai, not bechayim. Because chayim really connotes like the idea of like, I don't know.
All right, I'm not going to go there because there's too many diyukim already that are in the mimer, but we'll think about that. Shinyanu hu is galus hanefesh. Yeah.
That's an interesting aside. You said about conception. At the moment the sperm crosses into the egg, there's actually a flash of light that you can see with a microscope that science is still yet to really fully explain.
What?
It's a visible flash of light at the moment that the sperm crosses into the egg.
Life. Okay, I mean, the truth is that whether it's conception or birth is a little bit of obviously a conversation, but it has some type of life when it's in the mother. The only question is, whose life does it have, right? So according to our sort of records, it has the mother's life. It doesn't have its own life yet, but it's still alive, right? So in other words, it's something like a limb of the mother, but even without getting into this conversation, even if you want to talk about birth, the idea is that it comes alive. The question is it holding on to the mother's nefesh while it's still one of her limbs, or does it have its own independent life? But it's called life. Okay, so back inside, so the beginning of the introduction to the nefesh touching the body gives it this general life that we're discussing. And that's the idea of the nefesh all of a sudden revealing itself. Since the nefesh is essentially chai, therefore everything that comes out of it is life. Just like, for example, if you have a flashlight, right? So you have a certain type of light bulb, and the thing that's going to come out of that light bulb is called light, because the revelation is comparable to the source of the revelation. We call it the or and the ma'or. There's the luminary and there's the illumination, right? So you're going to always have a comparison. If it's sunlight, if it's candlelight, you'll know what the source is from the revelation, because they basically bear the same qualities. So if the source is life, right, which is the nefesh, it's being alive, so then the revelation is also called life. What it beams out of it is life. It's not just light, right? It's life. So this is the idea of what happens when it's nafshenu. When the soul comes into the body, it reveals itself to another, and then that thing is alive. And it gives out a similar revelation to itself. So since it is general life without particulars, what it shoots out of the flashlight of life is also general life without particulars, right? So it just brings the first stage of it enlivening the body is just it's alive without necessarily breaking down into the particulars of the gradients of life. Lo hagbalos v'agdaros, which means it has no limitations, it has no form and categorization, right, of its essential life-giving. Valachas kam v'kama lo helmos v'astarim, and it certainly doesn't have any concealments upon that life, right? It's like the raw life itself. Noam?
What is the law? Like, why is it not law? Just, I guess, the grammar.
It's like saying, because lo wouldn't make really sense there. It means like, it's like without. Lo is like without. Whereas lo would just be like, it doesn't.
Oh.
Yeah. It's an interesting point.
Towards the law.
Yeah. In any case, it doesn't have limitation. It certainly doesn't have concealments on this life. The alpizeh, and therefore, accordingly, eino muvan, we don't understand mahu omro hasam nafshenu b'chayim, right? It doesn't make any sense. Back to our original question, when you're going to give life to this essential life, it doesn't need your life giving, right? It can't go anywhere. Even the life force of the body, which is already a revelation that is coming off of the essential life, has itself essential life. In other words, we can't even sort of say, well, you're going to give you're going to level up the life of the body, right? Because it's at least receiving life from the soul. No, it receives life from the soul at the same category, which is the soul itself, which is without category, right? It receives essential life. So even on nafshenu, even on the animal soul, it doesn't make sense to say that you're going to level up in life, because the essence of the soul gives essential life to whatever it touches. Okay, period. We have to the question. What are you adding by adding life to the soul? Putting the soul in life. It doesn't make sense. Now going back to the Frierdiker Rebbe, we're quoting him. And he ends the mimer in the following way. And it must imply from here, okay, we have nowhere else to go. It must be, we're inventing a new category of life now that didn't exist before, that we didn't understand, was there. And it's the idea that there's going to be a new level of higher life, which is even higher than essential life. And that's what it means. You're giving our soul life. It doesn't need any life. You're like inventing a new category of life to something which is essentially alive. That's what he concludes. What's that?
What do you mean there's gonna be?
In other words, whenever God is saying that he was Sam Nafsheinu B'chaim, he put our soul in life, it must be that at that moment he introduces a new category of life which is beyond essential life.
When is this at birth?
This is when the Frierdiker Rebbe is basically explaining what happened to him. I'm saying when the Frierdiker Rebbe was saying this mimer, he was saying it, let's say, on an occasion of this great miracle that took place for him, that he was freed from communist rule and a life decree, right? So there was a miracle that took place. Something happened to his life which was different than anything that happened to even the life of a Rebbe up until that point, right? We're celebrating to this day, almost 100 years later, very close to 100 years later from this event. Right? And the Rebbe always says we can't let this like slip away in our minds, just like Purim. Right? These matters, it says in the Megillah, you mention them and then they happen. We have to mention them properly. We have to understand what they are because they don't go away days like this. And the reason is because Hasam Nafsheinu B'chaim, a new level of life force from God was like invented on that day, which once that day happens in the next year, you can still access it again. So in other words, in the life of the Rebbe himself, he's at one point accessed something that he didn't access until that point in his life.
So only the Frierdiker Rebbe got this actually.
Well, once he got it, and he shared, and like he wrote a mimer about it and explained to us what happened, the Rebbe's saying he put it on the table. It's available, right?
Before then it wasn't?
Seemingly, either it was and we didn't know about it, but the whole idea is that there's certain new revelations, right? Before the splitting of the sea, did God have the capacity to split the sea? So the level of God existed that could split a sea, but we didn't know about it, right? So every time there's a miracle for the Jewish people, especially a miracle from a Nasi of the generation, especially in the end of days, which is the Ikvus of the Mashiach, where like the Mamash Mashiach is coming, these miracles are not stam. That's why the Rebbe continues to speak about it, not once in a year, but there's the whole lead up to from Sivan until the end of Tammuz. He's mimer after mimer after mimer for 40 years. He's trying to get into our heads. What happened here was Mamash nothing short of the Megillah, right? This is Jewish history, biblical history in the making, and it's Sam Nafsheinu B'chaim.
When the Rebbe is saying he gave me life, he put my soul in life, he's talking specifically when he left the prison?
Yeah. It's Yud Beis Tammuz Mimer. So on Yud Beis Tammuz is when he was officially freed. Maybe he didn't leave the prison yet because there's an interesting story how it was Shabbos that day and he didn't want to even sign the papers to break Shabbos to free himself and save his life. He was like, it was his position. He was so tokef with Yiddishkeit that even to sign his own life papers, he said, Shabbos, leave me alone. Like, come back to me tomorrow.
So amazing.
Yeah.
We're quoting a Tehillim, right?
Right. So it was there.
This happened before as well.
You know, it's interesting that you're saying that. Like, the whole idea of Hashgacha Pratis, Li'olam Hashem Devarecha Nitzav B'Shamayim, which is the basis of Shar HaYuchad V'Emunah, of the second book of Tanya, which essentially changed the entire Jewish outlook on existence for all mankind, not just for Jews, but for everyone, that Hashem is constantly enlivening the world, and that your word is standing forever in the heavens, means that the letters Yehi Rakia, right, that let there be a firmament, is being spoken at every second by Hashem, and that's the existence of reality. It's a mamash amazing insight that nobody really picked up on before. And guess what? It was just a pasuk in Tehillim, right? So the fact that it's a pasuk in Tehillim is what I'm saying. Did God have the power to split the sea before He did? Yes, but nobody knew about it.
So what was it talking about?
So the fact that the simple meaning is He kept us. The Rabbi mentioned the simple meaning. He kept us alive. Even our foot didn't falter, right? That's just how you read this. But the problem is, if you look at it a little bit closer, with Hasidic glasses, nafsheinu b'chaim. Our soul is already essentially alive, not partially alive, not at the top of the chain. It is life itself. How can you give it more life? There's a new level of new sheriff in town. Higher than essential life. Okay, how are we holding here? We got 6 minutes and we're going to use them. All right, 4 lines down from the top. We have to understand Ma'u inyan ha'chaim shem chaim na'ili ma'achai be'etzem. This is still the final quote from the Frierdiker Rebbe. What is life which is higher than essential life? What does it even mean? And now the Rebbe comes in. No, he's sort of continuing the Frierdiker Rebbe's words. We further have to understand, as the Frierdiker Rebbe continues, quote, this is what Zalman was just getting to. What does the end of this verse have to do with anything? That He didn't let our foot stumble. Now, if you want to say this new insight, that He placed our life, our soul in life, is now suddenly a realization that is life which is that it's a type of life that He gave us which is beyond essential life. Now, if you're going to sort of learn the Hasidic perush on that, you now suddenly have a new question, which I think you were getting at, in this pasuk, right? Which no longer goes according to the simple meaning. In other words, according to the simple meaning, you don't need any explanation. He kept us alive. Thank God we're not the opposite of life. We're alive. And even our foot didn't falter. It doesn't really require any special explanation that, you're alive and even down to your foot. But now you're going to say that the first part of the pasuk means He brought forth a higher level of life force than even essential life. Then what does it have to do with my foot didn't falter? That now seems like sort of a non sequitur, which has to be explained in conjunction of what does it have to do with this wondrous revelation that you've just described to me. Right? Ma'u hakishur, the Sefer L'Kra. What does the Reisha and the Sefer have to do with each other? The beginning and the end of this verse. Lo nasan lamot ragleinu, that my foot won't falter. Halo arego kipshuto hu ha'evra hachi tachton baguf. Isn't the foot the lowest limb of the body? And it's basically, it's as far away as you can get from the limbs that contain the life that the soul depends on, the heart, the mind, right, the liver. Not only that, but the heel of the body, which is the least life force, the least amount of life that's in any limb of the body, to the point that we called it the angel of death a minute ago. It's in that very foot, right? Which is basically the lowest part of life in the whole body. And therefore, quoting the Frierdiker Rebbe, even the kochos penimim shebenefesh. What are the kochos penimim? The kochos penimim, they're inner powers. In other words, those powers as they come into revelation through the limbs of the body. In other words, as opposed to the essential life force that we've been discussing, the penimius kochos represents the idea that the life can sort of contract itself and be the life of a brain, the life of a heart, the life of a liver, the life of a foot. So he says, even in the penimius powers of the soul, which is not the life be'etzem, it's sort of life as it can be dialed into different levels. Hine koach hahiluch, the power of walking, which is the power that the foot contains, hu koach hayoser achron, it is the lowest power of the body. So in other words, in the body itself, right? The least dialed in amount of life that you have is the power that's contained in the foot. It's not the power of intelligence, it's not the power of emotion, those are high level things, right? It's just simply the power of movement, and not even movement of the arms, which is more sophisticated, just walking. And that, guess what? That level of life force, animals also have it. Animals can walk. Which shows us that in our own self, this is the level of animal life which is found inside of a human being. It's not even human life. Animals have this type of life. It's a type of life that we share with animals, and inside of us, it's the quality of life which is our animal life. This has very little seemingly to do with this new beginning of the verse, which we've just unearthed, this wild explanation that's higher than essential life. Why are you suddenly mentioning in the same breath the life of my foot, which is the least amount of life in the kochos penimim, even in the limited powers of the life of the soul? Right? What's the connection with nafshenu, which is the gilei and the hamshacha of the essence of the soul? And how much more so, so he goes through this like the Rebbe's kind of way, his holy way. He says, what does that have to do with even the revelation that comes from the soul? How much more so the soul itself? Remember we said the revelation is even essentially alive. How much more so the essence of the soul? And how much more so, Sam Nafshenu B'chaim, this new dimension of life, which is beyond the essence of life of the soul. What does it have to do with the foot? They're even higher. This new level of life that we've unearthed is even higher than essential life. And if you read the pasuk simply, the fact that our foot will not falter seems to be the outcome of the fact that he placed life into our essential soul. Hasam nafshenu b'chaim. He invented a new life force that's beyond essential life, and therefore our foot won't stumble. What's the connection? Right? That these higher life force, higher than the soul, higher even than the etzem of the soul, they specifically strengthen and uphold the foot. Even though seemingly they couldn't be further apart from each other.
And you just say that Hashem gave us such a strong life force that even your lowest part won't falter and will keep straight.
Okay, you could say something like that, but the point is that it's a very wild like juxtaposition suddenly. Why the foot, which requires seemingly the least amount of life, would be specifically strengthened by this new breed of life, which is beyond even the essential life force, right? If that essential life comes into the body, I wouldn't think automatically that, let's get my feet moving on this, right? It's something like grandiose, which would basically, I don't know, take the whole soul to another, to the fact that all of a sudden that my feet need to be strengthened, and for my feet to be strengthened, I need to introduce a new variant of life force, which is beyond essential life. Okay, you can have a good answer there. Let's develop it. Tomorrow.